the 7th of May, 1915. Off the old head of Kinsale, the Atlantic Ocean is a picture of deceptive tranquility. The afternoon sun glints off a placid surface, a welcome sight after a morning shrouded in fog. On the decks of a colossal passenger liner, the world feels safe. The Great War, raging across the European continent, seems a distant, abstract horror. Here, there is the gentle clinking of cutlery from the dining saloons as lunch service concludes. The laughter of children playing games on the promenade deck echoes softly. Passengers, a mix of wealthy industrialists, famous actors, and ordinary families seeking a new life, stroll in the cool sea air, their gazes fixed on the faint, green smudge of the Irish coast, their destination now tantalizingly close. They are aboard one of the fastest, most luxurious floating palaces ever built, a symbol of British maritime pride, nearing the end of a routine transatlantic crossing. But beneath the serene surface, in the cold, silent depths, a predator is lurking. Unseen, unheard, it is a new and terrifying weapon of modern warfare. Its crew, guided by a periscope that barely breaks the waves, has been waiting, watching. In this declared zone of war, normalcy is an illusion, and a simple voyage home is a gamble with fate. The lives of nearly 2,000 souls are unknowingly converging with a single, submerged hunter. This is the story of the RMS Lusitania. Our story's other party was not a force of nature, but a deliberate instrument of war. The German Unterseeboot U-20. Commissioned into the Imperial German Navy less than 2 years prior, she was a marvel of deadly efficiency. Just over 64 meters long, displacing 837 tons when submerged, the U-20 was a steel shark. Her power came from diesel engines on the surface and electric motors below, giving her a range of thousands of miles. Her teeth were 4 torpedo tubes, carrying a payload of 6 G-type torpedoes, each one packed with 160 kilograms of high explosives. Aboard this cramped, diesel-fueled vessel was a crew of 35 men, commanded by one of the German Navy's most capable and determined submarine aces, Kapitänleutnant Walther Schwieger. The 30-year-old commander was a veteran of the undersea service, known for his cold professionalism and aggressive tactics. His mission was brutally simple: to enforce Germany's naval blockade of Great Britain by sinking any and all Allied shipping found within the declared war zone around the British Isles. By early May 1915, Schwieger and the U-20 were nearing the end of a grimly successful patrol. They had already sunk 3 merchant vessels and were running low on fuel and torpedoes. Their station was the busy shipping lane off the southern Irish coast, a fatal funnel for any vessel heading to the port of Liverpool. On the morning of May 7th, Schwieger's orders were to begin the journey home. But he lingered, ever the hunter, scanning the horizon for one last, valuable prize. To understand the tragedy, we must go back 6 days, to Pier 54 in New York City. Here, the RMS Lusitania prepared for her 202nd transatlantic voyage. She was more than a ship. She was a national icon. Launched in 1906 for the Cunard Line, she and her sister ship, the Mauretania, were the queens of the ocean, holders of the blue ribbon for the fastest Atlantic crossing. A 4-funnel giant over 787 feet long, she was a testament to Edwardian-era engineering and luxury. A floating city of polished brass, mahogany, and crystal. Her master was Captain William Thomas Turner, a 59-year-old veteran with a lifetime at sea. A gruff, no-nonsense commodore of the Cunard fleet, Bowler Bill, as he was nicknamed, preferred the solitude of his bridge to the high society of the first-class lounge. He was tasked with the safety of 1,962 souls, a manifest that included 1,266 passengers and a crew of 696. Among them were some of the world's most prominent figures: millionaire Alfred Gwynne Vanderbilt, who was traveling to a meeting of the International Horse Breeders Association, theatrical producer Charles Frohman, and the author and philosopher Elbert Hubbard. But the ship was also filled with families, like Paul and Gladys Crompton, returning to England with their 6 children. For them, this was not a matter of war or politics. Tonight was just another leg of a familiar journey, a 6-day passage across the Atlantic in what was advertised as the safest and fastest way to travel. Despite the war, faith in the Lusitania's speed and power was absolute. She was, many believed, simply too fast for any submarine to catch. The two vessels, one a hunter and the other its unknowing prey, were on a collision course set by the inexorable logic of war. May 1, 1915, New York. As the Lusitania prepared to sail, a warning appeared in American newspapers, placed right beside the Cunard sailing schedule. It was from the Imperial German Embassy, explicitly stating that vessels flying the flag of Great Britain or her allies, entering the waters around the British Isles, did so at their own risk. The warning was largely ignored. The ship departed on time, a brass band playing on the pier. May 5th and 6th, Irish coast. Kapitänleutnant Schwieger and U-20 were active. On the 5th, he torpedoed and sank the sailing vessel Earl of Latham. On the 6th, he sank two larger steamships, the Candidate and the Centurion, in the very waters the Lusitania was scheduled to enter. The British Admiralty intercepted signals about this activity and issued vague warnings to all ships in the area, including the Lusitania, advising them to steer clear of headlands, steam at full speed, and employ a zigzag course. May 7th, 8 a.m. Aboard the Lusitania, Captain Turner received the latest Admiralty warnings. He took precautions, ordering all watertight doors closed, posting double lookouts, and blacking out the ship's portholes. However, a persistent bank of fog forced him to reduce speed to 18 knots. He also chose not to zigzag, believing it was an unnecessary maneuver in the fog and would delay his scheduled arrival. May 7th, 11 a.m. The fog began to lift. Captain Turner, needing to get a navigational fix, steered the Lusitania on a steady, straight course, parallel to the Irish coast. He was making for the port of Queenstown to drop off mail and passengers. May 7th, 1:20 p.m. Aboard U-20, low on fuel and preparing to head home, Schwieger was on the surface when his watch officer sighted a smudge of smoke on the horizon. He ordered a dive. Peering through his periscope, he saw 4 funnels and a forest of masts. It was a massive vessel moving at speed. By a stroke of what he called extraordinary luck, the ship was steaming directly towards him. He didn't have to chase, he just had to wait. 2:09 p.m. Schwieger gave the order. Fewer. A single G-type torpedo, a streak of compressed air and deadly purpose, launched from its tube. It traveled less than 700 meters. On the deck of the Lusitania, passengers enjoying the afternoon sun saw it first. A white line racing through the water. Some pointed, confused. A few seconds later, it struck. The torpedo hit the starboard side, just aft of the bridge. The impact was not a deafening roar, but a heavy, sickening shudder that ran the length of the ship. Many passengers thought they had hit a smaller boat or run aground. Then, mere seconds after the first impact, a second, far more powerful explosion erupted from within the ship's hull, directly below them. This second blast was catastrophic. It sent a geyser of coal, debris, and water high into the air, blowing a huge hole in the ship's side. The Lusitania immediately took on a severe list to starboard, so sharp and so sudden that the lifeboats on the port side swung inboard, useless, while those on the starboard side swung too far out, making them nearly impossible to launch. Chaos erupted. The ship's power failed almost instantly, plunging the interior into darkness and silencing the radio. Decks that were level seconds before became steep, slippery inclines. China, furniture, and people were thrown across rooms. On deck, the crew struggled to manage the panicking crowds and launch the few accessible lifeboats. Some boats were swamped upon launch. Others crashed onto the deck below, crushing those in their path. Captain Turner remained on his bridge, shouting orders that could no longer be heard, as the sea began to wash over the bow. Passengers and crew, some with life jackets, many without, were faced with a terrible choice. Jump into the cold Atlantic or go down with the ship. In just 18 minutes, the unsinkable Lusitania was gone. Kapitänleutnant Schwieger kept U-20's periscope raised. He watched the horrifying spectacle unfold. He noted the ship's rapid sinking, the great confusion on deck, and the thousands of people struggling in the water. His log entry is chillingly detached. It seems as if the vessel will be afloat only a short time. I submerge to 24 meters and go to sea. I could not have fired another torpedo into this mass of people struggling to save themselves. Having done his duty as he saw it, and with his own vessel in danger of being spotted, Schwieger gave the order to turn away. U-20 submerged and slipped away into the depths of the Atlantic, leaving a scene of unimaginable horror in its wake. He had sunk an enemy vessel carrying war munitions, as was his mission. He had no way of knowing, or perhaps no time to consider, that he had just lit a political fire that would engulf the world. Back on the surface, the ocean was a field of wreckage, bodies, and the desperate cries of the living. The first rescuers to arrive were not naval vessels, but small fishing boats from the nearby coast, like the Wanderer from Peel. Their crews, who had heard the explosion and seen the ship go down, rode into a nightmare, pulling whoever they could from the frigid water, surrounded by the dead and the dying. Within hours, the news of the Lusitania's sinking had been telegraphed around the globe. The port of Queenstown was transformed into a vast makeshift morgue. Rescuers brought in hundreds of bodies, laying them out in public buildings for identification. The world reeled in shock and outrage. The official investigation, led by Lord Mersey, who had also presided over the Titanic inquiry, was swift. The British inquiry concluded that the Lusitania was an innocent passenger ship, carrying no illicit munitions, and that her sinking was an act of brutal piracy by the German Navy. Captain Turner was initially blamed by the Admiralty for not following all orders, but the formal inquiry exonerated him, placing all responsibility on the murderous attack by U-20. However, a question lingered, a mystery that fuels debate to this day. What caused the devastating second explosion? Germany claimed it was the ignition of the 4,200 cases of rifle cartridges and over 1,200 cases of non-explosive shrapnel shells listed on the cargo manifest. Proof, they argued, that the Lusitania was a legitimate military target. The British government vehemently denied this, suggesting the explosion was caused by coal dust or a ruptured steam line. The truth remains buried with the wreck. The immediate consequence was not a change in maritime law, but a seismic shift in global politics. In the United States, which had remained staunchly neutral, the deaths of 128 American citizens aboard the Lusitania caused a firestorm of anti-German sentiment. Propaganda posters bearing the image of a drowning mother and child with the words, "Remember the Lusitania," appeared everywhere. While it did not immediately bring the U.S. into the war, the sinking irrevocably turned public opinion against Germany. Under pressure, Germany briefly suspended its policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. But the damage was done. The sinking of the Lusitania had planted a seed that, 2 years later, would finally bloom into America's declaration of war. The final toll was staggering. 1,198 men, women, and children lost their lives. Only 764 survived. Of the 6 Crompton children, only the baby, a 1-year-old, was saved. Alfred Vanderbilt, last seen giving his life jacket to a woman, went down with the ship, true to his earlier statement that he would do so if she were ever sunk. Captain Turner survived, clinging to a floating chair for 3 hours before being rescued, but he would be haunted by the tragedy for the rest of his life. Today, the wreck of the RMS Lusitania lies on its starboard side in 300 feet of water, 11 miles off the old head of Kinsale. It is a mangled, collapsing ruin, a designated war grave protected by Irish law. Expeditions to the wreck have been fraught with controversy, as divers and researchers continue to search for definitive proof of what caused that fatal second explosion. Looking out from this shore today, the sea tells no tales of the horror it witnessed. The waves are calm, the air is still. But here, in the town that became the center of the world's grief, a stone monument clings to the waterfront. It is a final tribute to the great ship and her passengers, an eternal reminder of the 1,198 souls lost in 18 minutes, and how the sinking of a passenger liner in the cold Atlantic waters helped drag a reluctant nation into the crucible of the First World War.